Dobry wieczór. Tutaj William. Witajcie na tygodniowym podsumowaniu polskich I irlandzkich wiadomości ze mną, William Murphy. The main headlines this week have included: Poland has eased some restrictions since Monday, with further measures to address the dire economic impact of COVID-19 to be implemented. The Constitutional Tribunal issues 2 rulings in favour of the government position in the ongoing dispute with the Supreme Court over the judicial reforms. Opposition parties continue their efforts to block the holding of the presidential election by postal ballot in May. And in Ireland, there's a High Court challenge to the constitutionality of the draconian COVID-19 restrictions. Starting with news from Poland. On Monday, the first stage in a 4-stage plan to ease restrictions imposed to counter the spread of coronavirus came into effect. Parks and forests are now open again. More people are allowed into shops, and those aged over 13 years of age can now move about by themselves, albeit in the same restricted way as the rest of the population. Previously, those aged under 18 had to be accompanied in public by an adult. Poland's government has vowed to inject more funds into the economy to help it weather the coronavirus crisis. President Duda has signed into law a measure to provide more support for the Polish economy, which was approved by Parliament last week. On Tuesday, the newly appointed Deputy Prime Minister, Jadwiga Emilewicz, who continues to serve as Development Minister, announced plans for a new aid package to fund businesses impacted by the economic collapse. She also said the government would protect Polish firms weakened by the economic contraction from being taken over cheaply by private equity funds, saying, "This is also taking care that Polish companies, which have been built laboriously for 30 years, do not become a cheap target in this difficult situation." At the same press conference, Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki called for a new Marshall Plan for Europe to aid the continent's recovery. Morawiecki said that there is no more important task for Europe today than to come up with what one can call a new Marshall Plan. Meanwhile, what to do about the presidential election, scheduled to take place in May, remains a source of major political controversy. Opposition parties, as well as a junior partner in the ruling coalition, are in discussions on options to scupper the all-postal vote being advocated by Prawo i Sprawiedliwość. Porozumienia are seeking cross-party support for their plan to extend the current presidential term to 7 years, but prohibit presidents including Andrzej Duda from seeking re-election. Such a constitutional change would require a 2/3 majority in Parliament. The main opposition bloc, Koalicja Obywatelska, wants a 1-year term extension to May 2021, which could be implemented by a declaration of a state of natural disaster, something the government is unwilling to do. The bill, already narrowly approved by the Sejm, to allow the all-postal ballot to go ahead, can be delayed in the opposition-controlled Senate for up to 30 days, before returning for a binding vote in the Sejm, where the stance of Porozumienia may be crucial. Health Minister Łukasz Szumowski claimed on Friday that the nearest time that elections involving voting in person will be possible safely is in 2 years. The Polish embassy in Dublin has highlighted that registration for eligible Polish nationals to vote in the presidential election on May 10th is now open. The current plan is for voting to take place only in person, unlike in Poland itself, in 3 electoral constituencies in Ireland. Full details are on the Polish Embassy Facebook page, which will also provide any subsequent updates. Poland's Constitutional Tribunal this week issued 2 rulings, both of which backed the government's position in its ongoing dispute with the Supreme Court over the judicial reforms. It ruled that the Supreme Court did not follow Polish and European law in recent judgments. The Supreme Court has, in turn, rejected the ruling of the Constitutional Tribunal, claiming it exceeded its authority and that it acts under government influence. On Monday, the Constitutional Tribunal ruled that the Supreme Court's declaration that all judges appointed by the newly constituted National Council of the Judiciary are illegitimate runs counter to the Polish Constitution and the Treaty on European Union. The original ruling had infuriated the government, who referred the matter to the Constitutional Tribunal for determination. In the second ruling on Tuesday, the tribunal said that the court cannot interpret provisions in a law-making manner, and as a result tried to reorganise the judicial system. The clash between the 2 institutions risks further confusion within the Polish judiciary. Poland has slipped to its lowest ever ranking of 62nd out of 180 in the latest annual World Press Freedom Index compiled by Reporters Without Borders. It puts Poland in the category of countries that have what's termed a noticeable problem with press freedom. The country report on Poland claims that the government's drive to subjugate the judicial system and a growing tendency to criminalise defamation are beginning to have an effect on the freedom of expression of independent media outlets. Given the robust nature of political debate in Poland, this is one story which doesn't ring true. It does, of course, fit the narrative of the European Union institutions' ongoing campaign against the Polish judicial reforms. On Monday, the US ambassador to Poland, Georgette Mosbacher, sent a tweet in support of private broadcaster TVN, owned by the US Discovery Company, which has come under sustained criticism on state-owned TVP, this time over its coverage of the commemorations marking the 10th anniversary of the Smolensk tragedy, describing it as a fake news factory. It was accused of overemphasising alleged breaches of the COVID-19 restrictions by top leaders, including Prawo i Sprawiedliwość chairman Jarosław Kaczynski. In Ireland this week, what's become the slow bicycle race of the task of government formation has continued, with ongoing efforts on the part of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael to entice smaller political parties or groupings of independents into a new administration. Meanwhile, in an RTE primetime interview on Tuesday night, Taoiseach Leo Varadkar said that a plan for a partial easing of the current restrictions would be released prior to the current May 5th date, when they're due to, but of course won't, end. He was at pains to stress that any easing would be partial, gradual and capable of reversal. So, in other words, the current disproportionate response is to continue. Some reality is being slowly brought to the current situation though, with Tuesday's outlining by Finance Minister Paschal Donohoe of what he termed a scenario rather than a forecast for the economy. The figures quoted are truly astounding, with an expected 10.5% reduction in economic activity this year and a government deficit of 7.4% of GDP. Of course, no one really knows what the true impact will be, and much depends on the duration of the current lockdown and what happens with the international economy, on which Ireland is more dependent than most. Interestingly, when questioned on Tuesday night, Leo Varadkar did concede that we'd only know long after the event how effective or otherwise the official responses were, and he interestingly added what steps were not necessary at all. Today, we live in what I'm thinking we should call the health state, rather than a free country, so the bias is in favour of the maximum restrictions to minimise risk. However ineffective or unnecessary it may subsequently be proven to be when applied to the general population. On Tuesday morning, the High Court heard arguments in an application for permission to launch judicial review proceedings being taken by the well-known journalists Gemma O'Doherty and John Waters against the Minister for Health, Ireland and the Attorney General over the laws introduced as part of the response to COVID-19. The applicants in the judicial review proceedings, which the state is opposing, want the newly enacted Health, Preservation and Protection and Other Emergency Measures in the Public Interest Act and the Emergency Measures in the Public Interest COVID-19 Act declared null and void, as well as striking down regulations brought in under the 1947 Health Act. Supporters of Gemma O'Doherty and John Waters were forced by Gardaí to leave the courtroom before the hearing commenced due to social distancing, leading to questions about the requirement for justice to be administered in public, but congregated in the round hall outside the courtroom. Miss Justice Deirdre Murphy adjourned the case for a week for a progress report, with the leave hearing itself in 2 weeks' time. The applicants had stressed the need for the matter to be heard as soon as possible. John Waters said the state respondents were trying to filibuster, procrastinate and delay a very important matter. Gemma O'Doherty told the court that what was happening under the lockdown is outrageous, with people being held under mass house arrest for fear of being questioned by Gardaí if they leave their homes. She said that people should be allowed to go about their business and normal life allowed to resume. She also questioned the medical justification for the lockdown. The Dáil, Shannon and the Cairn Corla have been added to the proceedings as notice parties, as part of the challenge concerns how the laws were enacted. Meanwhile, also on Tuesday, Gardaí in Dublin broke up a protest by former Debenhams workers, citing the COVID-19 restrictions of all things. Gardaí directed 5 former employees protesting in the city centre to end their protest as it was deemed a non-essential journey. Commenting, TD Breed Smith said that there was no public health issue on this protest, and it should not fall to the whim of the Garda to decide that workers protesting against the loss of their jobs and income after decades of service is non-essential and not allowed. At noon on Saturday, sirens blared in Warszawa to mark the 77th anniversary of the 1943 ghetto uprising. Official commemorations were scaled back due to the COVID-19 restrictions. The Warszawa ghetto uprising was the largest armed Jewish revolt during the Second World War. Prime Minister Morawiecki and Zygmunt Stepinski, head of the Poland Museum of the History of Polish Jews, laid wreaths at the Warszawa Ghetto Heroes Memorial. To finish on a positive note, I guess our message this week is to do what you can to stay informed, stay safe, but also, most importantly, stay free. Wolność jest ważna. Ta wszystko na czynczydzin. Zapraszam na kolejne podsumowanie z tydzień o tej samej porze. Dobranoc.